welcome to Voice of Women Live, episode 10. Today I'm here with Saša. I'm just going to add her in. I can hear you. Perfect.
Yeah, I need to sit back a bit. That's just my face.
I know, it comes so close, doesn't it? It gets closer when you actually first come on. Oh, my sister Saša, she's in here as well. She thought I was talking to her. Hi Saša, both Sašas.
Popular name.
I know, it's a gorgeous name. Hi Ryan. Okay, so first of all, let's do. Can you hear me and everything? Okay, it's going a little. Yeah.
You're back. Yeah. I don't know if I lost you.
It's a little bit glitchy, but hopefully it'll be all right. Hi guys, for everyone that's joining, we will be keeping an eye on the chat box and stuff as we go to answer any questions. So just bear with us when there's moments of quiet in the conversation and stuff like that. I kind of did a little bit of an introduction, Saša, before you came in and the kind of few things that we're going to be talking about. But would you like to start off with giving an introduction of yourself?
So to give a little introduction, I don't know really where to start because we had our pre-chat anyway, and it just went, we covered a lot in that. So basically my introduction is I'm Saša. I'm from the UK, in Liverpool. I'm 35. I was diagnosed with, I was going to say adult ADHD. Well, it's not. I was diagnosed as an adult with ADHD a couple of years ago. Before I was doing trauma coaching, I did a lot of work with unconscious bias and diversity and inclusion. And I've got my own personal views on how society is showing up and influencing our kind of well-being and mental health. And yeah, that's a little bit of an introduction, and I'm sure more will come out as we go.
As we go. So obviously, because I can't remember actually when I connected with you if I knew that you had ADHD or not. I can't remember. I don't think I did know. And then when we were talking about it, because this has been a thing that I've been in the process of trying to get diagnosed just now, because I've just obviously when we've been speaking, there was so much stuff that we had in common, and I think that was really nice as well, discovering all that kind of thing. And I know when we were talking about that side of things, we were kind of talking about, and I know for you as well, because you were an adult, all the things that you're then struggling with through that, because you don't realise that you actually can't help with the way that you're thinking. So I don't know if you want to maybe start and going into a little bit of detail about your journey with that to start with.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a massive part of my ADHD. I'm just turning the light down a bit. I can see too much of my face. It's too much for this time of the evening. Ultimately, yeah, it's my ADHD diagnosis was a massive part of how I've ended up doing what I do now. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time in the education world, and for somebody with ADHD, it was a really interesting choice because of the amount of struggle that I had. So I did my GCSEs and I did fine on them, a few A's, few B's. I got a C in classical studies, but it was kind of fine. Didn't really pick up on things. I remember when I was 12 years old being pulled into the head's office, and they were like, "Why have you gone down 38 places?" And I was like, I don't know. And I think that's quite a poignant moment of me internalizing a lot of shame and a bit of I don't know the answer to that question, but everybody else seems to be doing well.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of went on with it. And then I went to another school for sixth form and things started to plummet. I basically just messed up my A-levels. I spent the equivalent of 4 years in sixth form. And again, it was kind of not understanding why my friends were going out as much as I was, but they weren't struggling as much as I was, and there was a lot less structure at sixth form. Then went to university, and again struggling.
It's the lack of structure, isn't it?
Such a lack of structure. I had structure. I went to the pub every day. That was
that's interesting. That's stimulating, right?
Absolutely. And using alcohol to regulate. It's really common for undiagnosed ADHD people to use stimulants such as nicotine, even illegal drugs like cocaine, and alcohol and things like that, and marijuana, weed, whatever, to regulate, because as you said before, like it's that lack of control of your thinking. So I went through that, and then I went into teaching, and I really enjoyed the teaching, and I learned a lot more about different educational styles, different learning disabilities, and like I really like that side of it. And when I had that like one step removed, it was like, okay, like you can, when I wasn't feeling the shame, I could find other solutions and like how to help someone learn. So like I took that on. I went back to university at age 27, and I was still undiagnosed ADHD, but I did much better. Like I got first in my project, and like,
Well
you know,
done,
felt really good about that. Yeah, like it felt really good. But then I went back into teaching, and it was that same feeling of, why can I not do what my peers are doing? Like I was burning out all the time. I had sinus problems. Like I had sciatica. My asthma was horrendous. I was drinking like a bottle of wine a night just to get through the day, and I didn't understand why everyone else was okay. And then, you know, long story short, it got to a point where there was too many burnouts for me not to say like, I think I need to stop this.
And then that was a lot of the stuff you were telling me about, the stress you're putting your body under and all of those things, right?
Like absolutely, and they all kind of like bleed into one. Yeah, and it's like that amount of physical stress and emotional stress, like your body doesn't know the difference. And so like teaching is physically stressful and emotionally stressful, and then you've got your own internal workings on how you relate to your own environment, and it was too much for me. So I sidestepped into it was still in physics education. I worked for the Institute of Physics for 4 years, and that's where I did a lot on the diversity and inclusion and unconscious bias. And it was around that similar time as when I went to therapy for personal reasons. I was struggling with some responses to like relationship dynamics, and they basically just said like, I'm really sorry, I can't work with you yet, and in a really professional and gentle and supportive way. Because I was so disconnected from my body, they said like, I really advise you to get an ADHD diagnosis, and then like, you know, get a support plan around that to be able to like get into some form of regulation. And that was like the start of everything, and everything changed from there. So I'm gonna stop there, just because like,
no, don't be silly, because this is also the thing, because I know from my own experience, like when I've been talking too much, I feel as if I've been talking too much. So don't worry, like just talk away, because I'll just go off of like what you've said, like, and like steer it with like certain questions and stuff. So no, don't worry, like what you're saying is super interesting. And see, now this is my ADHD coming in, because I was just thinking of something that I was going to ask you, and now I've got totally just disappeared out of my head.
It'll come back. Or
my whole train of thought just went, because of what I ended up started thinking about that. But what was it you were saying about oh, that's what I was going to ask you about, the masking side of things. And I think when you're in that space of like, why are my peers doing this, and then like you end up looking at people, right, and you're trying to copy them and trying to take on their personas, and it's funny because I'm watching you and you're talking and you're itching like this, and then I like, whenever I'm talking, it's so funny, like it's just one of those things, isn't it? Like, I end up getting itches everywhere. But yeah, that thing of masking and like knowing that how you're seeing the world is totally different to how other people are, and you know that you need to do this, this and this to fit in. So that must have been challenging for you as well, right? When you're trying to fit in this environment, you're looking around you and you're like, oh, they're doing so much better than me, and they're doing this, like, so why can't I? So what was it like for you, like, getting that diagnosis?
Well, I know I sent you my meme page afterwards, like
yes.
and like there's a post I put on there, and I called it relief, like a mixture of grief and relief, because it's like that whole idea is when you look back and be like, think of all the shame and internal struggles and just not being able to show up and feel confident and be confused about like what my freaking place was in the world. Like, yes. I didn't really understand why I wasn't, fitting in is the word that's coming to mind, but it's deeper than that.
Yeah, it is. It's not like a ego thing. It's just like, I think I don't like, for me it's that thing of no one can relate to the feelings and experiences that you're having, and you say something to try and like touch the iceberg, and people, it just washes over people's heads. And I think that's what's been so nice, isn't it, when we've been speaking, we're like, yeah, and then this, and then yeah, this. But anyway, like, I'll let you carry on with what you were saying about
No,
fitting
but I
in.
think that's the exact same point. And you said, like, what's it been like for me getting the diagnosis? It's finding community. Now, I've been
Yeah.
really, really lucky in the past. I've always had like such incredible friendships, and they've always been like, on the whole, really, really understanding about my. I was gonna say like shortcomings or whatever they are, but like I still struggle to organize a living space. Like that's not the diagnosis, like that's still a reality. So people who spend time in my space are either, you know, gonna have to help me clean, or deal with it. So it's just like a really, yeah, an interesting one. And then it's the relief of being able to say, like, what does it feel like to be like, okay, this is why I felt a lot of the things that I felt,
Yeah.
and why my
Yeah.
brain actually functions differently.
Yeah.
I've been able to sit with that and being like, okay.
Okay, and also like I think it changes your perception, doesn't it? And I think this can relate to so many things. Like if you know that you're like in a box, and also like I think it's a good way to like think about our lives anyway, and not put so much pressure on ourselves. Like we shouldn't need a diagnosis to give ourselves that space that we need. Like obviously, like by having that, I can, there's certain things that I can now, and I've not had a diagnosis yet, but having that kind of label gives me a space to laugh it off. And I've noticed how my relationships change. My sister, like when like we've had this thing, because she gets so mad at me, like, Carrie, it's like you don't care, or you're not listening, or you're not this and you're not that, you're not being attentive. And I was like, yeah, but it's because you've just not caught my attention. Something else has got my attention. So now I should just stand waving at me like, Caris, are you here? And I'd be like, yeah, okay, right, I'm focused. And I think it's like, it's those kind of coping mechanisms to notice the thing that it's not caring, and it's not like being disorganized. It's just having your focus in different spaces, and you can't not choose where that is. So I think that was like, that's quite a big thing for it as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, because that's the point. And it's you know, we touched on it a little bit last time. It's that expectation, the expectation others have of us. They shift when they know either we've got a potential diagnosis or a diagnosis. That those conversations can be had where people then aren't responding in, you know, like dismissive ways, and that leads very much into like how we hold on to unconscious beliefs, and like how they show up, like even like between siblings or anything like that, like in our workspaces. You know, you even said you don't have a diagnosis just yet. You know, this is why we need workspaces to have just more of an inclusive, and you know, I'm using the term trauma informed vibe, because whether you've got a diagnosis or not, we all have different needs, we all have different working styles, and this bizarre like corporate one size fits all is absolutely ridiculous. And then COVID in one way helped, but then it didn't in the other, because then we've got like streams of information going to people like constantly, and like especially people with like neurodivergence or learning disabilities. There's no, well, there's a lot of reports of people, you know, just having meetings back to back. They're not actually, you know, in spaces where they can actually do their work and enjoy their work. But there's a tangent on diagnosing the right thing.
But that is also what's challenging, isn't it? Because there's certain people who won't have a diagnosis for certain things that they experience, and I think it's really important, and I think I want to like use this as like a pivot into that kind of unconscious bias. Like it's really important to listen, and actively listen to the people that we are engaging with on a daily basis, because what I've realized through my own journey of taking away all these layers of unconscious bias, which we all have, even if you are in a minority group, which I hate that word so much, but it's just a way of explaining the kind of groups of people that I'm talking about. If you're in one of those groups, you can still have bias to other groups, and even people in the same group of people. Because, so what I was wanting to going to say was, like, we need to actively listen, I think. And I've definitely been like susceptible to doing this myself, like talking over someone, like, no, I didn't mean it like that, or like, no, it wasn't like that, instead of going, okay, well, what are they actually trying to say to me? And I think it's hard, isn't it, to reflect on our own behaviour instead of, no, don't put this on me because you're not taking this how I'm meaning it. But actually it's about stopping and reflecting on how we're treating the people around us and listening to what they're saying. Just because they don't like something doesn't mean that it's a personal attack on us or on you. It's more that thing of like, okay, well, how can I take what they're saying to be better next time? It's not an attack on me.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, and it's that power of the pause. And a few things came to mind when you were talking
Power of the
about
pause, I love that. That's good.
power of the pause. But then I look back to the time like pre-therapy when she was like, you're just too disconnected from yourself. I felt it so uncomfortable to be in my body. So the thought of a pause was really uncomfortable. I'd want to just be like, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. Like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's a compulsion. I don't think you could have told me at the time how to really hold that pause as effectively as I can do it now. It's kind of like I've had to go around the houses. I've had to do like nervous system regulation, emotional regulation. You know, I've had to work on all of those things to be able to do better. Obviously, perfect, what you were saying, and that's what we need to do. And it's kind of like the concept of the activated activist. Like there's so many of us who are deeply passionate about supporting people, and we're kind of like arguing at each other instead of being like, why are we not coming together on this and like finding solutions? And it is that idea of being activated. There's an element of threat that comes up for a lot of us, and essentially we're shouting from our fight or flight response, which for the fun part of the science is access to our prefrontal cortex is less when we're in that state, so we're not going to have a rational conversation. So it is going back to that pause and being like, okay, did what I say land well? No, it didn't. Okay, what can I control? Can I rephrase it? Are they being an asshole? Because also, you know, like they've got to take responsibility for themselves. And it's kind of like, where does my responsibility for how I deliver something start and stop, start and end, or whatever it is, and like that else. And it's a journey. It's a journey to go on that, especially when like we're so passionate about like all of these.
And the passion's such a big part of it, isn't it? Because whenever, like, because I've seen like me saying things to people and they'd be like, whoa, Caris, calm down. I was like, well, I'm not worked up here. I'm just passionate about what I'm saying, and there is energy behind it. And I think with what we're talking about, like such a beautiful image that comes into my mind, which is actually that I'd never planned for this to happen with my work. But when in an exhibition space, like when I've like had the paintings up on the wall with people coming up and reading the women's stories, and also they're like looking at their paintings, they're standing next to me for starters if they ask me to come and talk to some of their work. So they're standing next to me. We're not having a conversation like straight right on from each other, which we so often are in communicating settings. So we're standing next to each other for starters. Also, they're not confronted with words or political views. It's a moment to stop and see what's in front of them. So they don't feel threatened. So the nervous system, is, as you're saying, kind of relaxes a little bit. And then you can start to have a conversation standing beside someone. And honestly, like the power that I've seen and the conversations that I've been able to have with complete strangers as a conversation with tough topics, from like abuse and like racism and ableist views and all these kind of things in this space, has been so powerful, because we've got that energy of standing beside each other, and also it's like a view that's there of someone's story that isn't subjective, because that's their truth. So there's always that point to come back to, which is what we're talking about, and that point from that person's perception. And I think when we can do that, we can look at the person that we are seeing and look at it on like a one-to-one basis. I think sometimes with all these big topics of unconscious bias around so many different things, and we'll go into gender in a second, but all those things around all these labels, like when we're having these conversations, we go, yeah, but these people are like this, they're like this. It's like, yeah, but we're here just now creating this energy in this conversation. So what is it that's creating discomfort for you right now over this topic, when it shouldn't be creating discomfort a lot of the time? Like, we're all human and we're just trying to find that connection. We're trying to find that sense to be heard. but we don't like to listen. Like, none of us. I hate listening. Like, but when you find that connection, like the way that we are now and the way that we've been communicating, when you can actually listen, and then when you find that connection, you're then standing beside each other right at the wall, and then you're having a conversation together instead of like, no, listen to me, and fighting for this like middle spot.
Oh my goodness, like I couldn't agree more. And that phrase you said, like, what's bringing the discomfort up for you? That question in itself has been missing out of so many conversations. If that question holds so much power, because if you say something, it's like, what are you finding uncomfortable about that? Like, what is it? And then when you actually hear what they're saying is, you know, a lot of, with the particular topics that we're speaking about, and I'm thinking like diversity, inclusion, you know, and you said like, again, minority groups, like wording, but you know what we're talking about. It's that idea of, actually, you've got two groups of people who don't want freedoms restricted. That's it. They do want liberation for people. They do want, you know, like freedom and comfort and safety.
Which we all do.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a trigger somewhere along the line, which is hearing, well, if you do that for that person, you're taking that from me. And it's about kind of being like, okay, where's the lie? And then we come back to internalizing our limiting beliefs. What limiting belief do you hold about yourself or the world that is stopping you being able to connect and communicate in that moment? And it's funnels right down to that, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing of all these things. I think we can look at, I mean, I overanalyze everything, and I'm sure that you do as well, because your brain doesn't stop, but you need to think about everything to make it stop.
Maybe.
So it's that way of like, actually what I've realized is it can all be quite simple. Everything in life can actually be quite simple. As humans, we love to put all these fancy names and labels and values on things that don't need to be there, away from the core values of going from here. We all know what it feels like to be working from this space, and you feel that fuzzy feeling, and you genuinely feel the connection that's beyond words when you're working from that space and communicating in that way. But we, especially here in the West, we don't know, we don't tune into that area of our bodies. We're like looking at our reflection in the mirror and looking at our body should be like this, and we end up hating our body and moving away from this amazing light, however you want to put it, however cheesy it wants to sound. Like, we've got this amazing light inside of us, and when we tune into that, we feel so much more than this body that we put so much hate on because it doesn't look this way, to this world that is not human. Like, we don't, like, the world in which we live in, especially the world of social media, there's very little connection like this. Genuine connection and genuine communication and conversation where like people are communicating properly. And just like, even though like you're from there, I'm from here, we've had totally different lives, and before we'd even like had this conversation, like we've only spoken once before, and the connection that you can build up, and when you actually like just take a minute to stop and not be like confronting one another, it's so powerful. And you can literally, like, this is what my thing always is, like, you can literally do that with anyone. We've all got a heart and a brain, and we're communicating between the two of us, and there's always like those feelings that we can tune into somewhere. I really believe that, somewhere along those lines.
Oh my God, like, you just put that in the most beautiful way possible. I couldn't agree more. Like, and what one thing that I do want to pick up with is, you said we all know what it feels like to come out of this place. I don't actually believe that's true.
Do you know?
Because it has been I believe we can always come back to it.
Yeah.
Because I think for many of us, as you said, we're focused on the outside of the body, and we're fetishizing the mind with all the labels and blah, 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 and all of that. So many of us have lost that connection. So it's not that it doesn't exist. They've lost that connection. I was one of those people. Like, I now walk around not in a state of hypervigilance and anxiety. I spent 33 years in anxiety. I didn't know there was another way to experience my body that wasn't like in some form of like tension. Like, bracing myself for like, fuck, what's next? What am I going to do wrong? Like, what is wrong? Like, blah, just like, you know, what have I forgotten? What am I, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's how fast and like buzzy things are. And now I can occupy that space that you said.
Yeah.
Fucking gorgeous.
Yeah, when you can find, even if it is just for a second. Sorry, what?
It's like, sorry for F-bombing.
Oh, no. None of that. But yeah, like, that's actually, and I'm glad you picked up on that as well, actually, because I think, like, that's a great way to put it. We all have the capacity to sit in that space, for sure. And I think, like, when you can, and I really appreciate that from your point of view as well, because of the experiences that you've had and where you've come from, and also, like, as a trauma coach. Do you maybe want to talk about that as well, actually? I don't know, like, what you want to mention about that, but your experience as a trauma coach and just something about that, because you're so knowledgeable with all that stuff.
Essentially, it's like what we've been talking about, and this is why, like, it's just an amazing thing, like, for all of my experiences to really hit this point, which is exactly what you said. It's about coming back to the body. It's about being able to hold space for your own emotions. It's about being able to take that pause and look at an unconscious belief. Like, is what I'm thinking and feeling, because there's only like 6 feelings. So a lot of the time we have a perception, like, I feel abandoned, I feel vulnerable. These aren't feelings, these are perceptions. So it's literally like primary school version, like anger, sadness, grief, joy, you know, like there's like literally about 6 of them, and then obviously we've got our secondary ones. But when we really start going into our secondary ones, it's about perception. And then when we can
it can be simpler, right?
Yeah, we can get to that. And it's like, what meaning am I assigning to it? What meaning am I assigning about myself? What meaning am I assigning about somebody else or the world around me? And because, like, an emotion only lasts 90 seconds from peak to end, unless we get stuck in the story. And if we feed this, like, we're basically feeding like this, you know, like, he pissed me off or he said that, rah, rah, rah. That's a story. Like, I feel anger. Okay, let's explore that. What's in that anger? Well, okay, I felt angry because I wasn't heard. Okay, well, what did you make that mean? Well, my opinion's not valuable. Okay, so let's sit with that. Is there a feeling that comes with that? Yeah, I feel sad. Oh, fuck, I'd feel sad too if I felt unheard. And usually it tracks back to, not always childhood, but, you know, previously. It's usually something we're carrying with us. You know, we carried it with us for too long. We need to put that shit down, you know. And that's basically what we're focusing on in the trauma coaching, because essentially it's about, like, what are you carrying with you that is not yours? What is stopping you from being in the present moment? And essentially, so, like, all the threads that we've spoke about until now, that's essentially the elements within that. So yeah, that's the trauma coaching.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because I think that's the thing as well. It's like, when you're mentioning it coming from childhood, a lot of the time we don't realize that how we've reacted to someone in the supermarket is to do, like, you're like that. Before you start digging deep like that, you're like, nah, no way, that can't be possible. But actually, like, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I'm sure my dad won't mind me saying this, but he's 60 something, and he's only just realizing now, like, stuff that he's been carrying with him from his mum now. And it's just like, that's so common. And he's like, wow, like, I really didn't, this is now why I'm doing this. And it's like, well, like, that's mad. And it becomes obvious. That's the weird thing, right? It becomes obvious when you, like, dig that deep. It's literally like digging a hole, isn't it? Like, you're like, there can't be treasure there because you can't see it, but maybe you've got an idea that something there, so you dig, and then it becomes so obvious because you're looking at it straight right there. You're like, oh, well, obviously it was there the whole time.
And it sounds poetic and, like, you know, because there's a big crossover with like trauma healing and the spiritual world. So it's kind of like that whole idea, like the light inside of you, it's been out there all along. I'm like you, I don't care what you call it, but there is a place inside of us which is an incredibly regulated state. From a scientific point of view, you might want to call it your mental bagel state, when your nervous system is at that point, and it allows you to like connect with people, regulate your heart and your blood flow. It allows your prefrontal cortex to be online, so you can have like discussions. As you said, like, so you're not just kicking off at someone in the supermarket being like, what a dickhead. You know, and it's just, I've forgotten what you said there, but
no, it was on topic. It was on topic. I just love having this conversation with you as well, because I totally hear you. That always happens, doesn't it? You're in the middle of talking and then it just cuts off.
It just went off on its own. It's gone on its own adventure.
Yeah. No, don't worry. Okay, so all of this tying in is going back to the thing of labels and boxes and all these kind of things. So obviously, like, we'd had a conversation like about your gender and all these things. So do you maybe want to lead into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember something that we said from our previous conversation, and that, you know, like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, you know, we are going to this is about our lived experience. We might not include certain people's groups or experiences.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody. Like, this is my experience and my gender.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I've never really felt 100% feminine. You know, I do present, well, like, what's the language is like femme, like I have like long hair, I have some makeup on, and that is like an element of my expression. However, like, there's many parts of me which I do not feel fit the typical stereotype. And this is where the gender conversation gets really interesting for me, because it's kind of like we've gone down the layers today already. So I'm saying at a societal level, I don't feel that I am what is classed as a woman.
Yeah.
Now, other non-binary people might not have the same relationship. It may be different for them. But like, I have a really like a very strong awareness, connection to my masculine energy. And like that's a phrase which I found from, again, like the yoga world, like masculine energies, feminine energies. They're kind of like, it's like the yin yang. We've all got them. So, and again, it's really, really personal for different people. But I just want to show you something as well. So
yeah, for sure.
And Laura got me this, and like, I absolutely love it. It's a hair bow, and it's like half Aladdin, half Jasmine.
Oh,
and
awesome.
Yeah, and what was amazing, like, she got it because she knew I loved Aladdin and Jasmine, but it really, like, it brought back like an amazingly strong memory of when I was a child. I had both the Aladdin and the Jasmine outfits, and I used to love putting both on. Like, I used to love being both, and I've really felt uncomfortable as I've grown up in the time vibe. So like, I'm 35 now, so growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, about the views on women and even the views on men, like, it's so alien to the humanity inside of us. I remove myself from that. So when I use the pronouns she, they, because I do have a connection to my feminine, but I also just want to like have some distance between me and the idea of gender, because for me personally, it's the human meat skeleton to human meat skeleton that is the most important thing for me. And, you know, so I use the they to embrace that real, like, it's for me, it's a nod to my humanity above anything else. Yeah. So yeah, like that's a little bit on that.
Do you know what just came into my mind just now, actually, that I've not really thought about before when you were talking about that? Do you think, like, obviously, just for your personal experience, we can't speak for everyone, but do you think if the connotations of that box, right, of woman and man didn't come with this whole other manuscript of what all these things meant? Like, for example, if our gender was just the body and the genitals that we were born into, and that was it, like, it was literally just to show that, and there wasn't all these other connotations that if you're female, you've got all these energies and you need to do this and your energy's like this, and if you're masculine, if you're a male, all the energies, things like that. And if it was just about literally the genitals you had and there wasn't no more connotations, do you think there would be a lot less, but also a lot healthier relationship that we have with what gender and what that means?
I think that is an incredibly like huge question, and I think the best way to answer it is, for me personally, like, because I'm still learning. Because I remember I started this journey about 4 years ago with the Institute of Physics, because that's when I was delivering training on unconscious bias and stereotypes. And actually, we've done some action research in, well, we did, because I don't work for the Institute of Physics anymore, but we did like research in schools on how reducing stereotypes and how we present them in the classroom can actually improve the amount of girls taking A-level physics. So, or registered females taking A-level physics. And it's just the language of like just saying just the body to the genitals or anything like that. But like there's another thing that's come into my mind, which is you've got intersex people who are, there's about the same amount of people who've got ginger hair, who are born with ginger hair, are born intersex. We've got a whole population of people who don't go into a binary in terms of sex and genitals and hormones, and there's so many characteristics to do with that. And then we've got the honoring the journeys and the expressions of transgender people, you know. And so for me personally, I'm actually gonna answer it with something that I heard at a training. So I was getting trained on transgender issues, and the transgender man gave a personal story and said, as they were about to transition, their dad said to them, if there was no such thing as, you know, like if there weren't, so I think it was very similar to you, if there weren't so much restrictions on men to be this way and women to be this way, would you be doing this? And the reaction from this person was really beautiful, and it's really stayed with me. Like, they lit up and they laughed and they were like, Dad, I don't know the answer to that question. Because I don't live in that world. And I think that's the crux of it. We get into so many idealistic situations with this. Like, you know, my basic ideal is what I said, like human meat skeleton to human meat skeleton. However you are, and you feel safe and you feel comfortable and you get to like be present and connect and be in a community, whatever label suits. Like for me personally, the value of a label is to access resources and community. That's it. Like I don't personally see much more value on a label than that. So yeah, I think I love the idea of removing gender barriers rather than the concept of gender, because as I said, I'm like really, I'm fiercely protective of however somebody wants to express and experience their gender. So like, I wouldn't want my perceptions to invalidate someone else's experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that is important to like mention as well. But it was just, I thought that just came into my head, because I suppose like what that feeling of uncomfort is like, well, if you're seen like that, then you're not like this. And obviously like this is something that I'd like express with you, and this has been a huge thing for me, which is how I can kind of relate to that, because if there wasn't all these labels on being female or being male, then you wouldn't feel as uncomfortable in that space, because you then don't need to accept all those labels of those feelings. And I've got mixed ethnicity, and I never really knew what that was or who that was, but I knew that my nana was mixed race, and we didn't know until the beginning of this year when I did a DNA test, and now I've got 800 Grenadian cousins who are all black. Yeah, I thought I'd said this to you, and
I didn't know about the 800. I knew it was Canadian.
Yeah, there's 800 of them. Madness, and growing. But it is mad, and it's that thing for me that when I tick a box, I need to tick white. But and so many of my friends, I've had this conversation, and it blows my mind, because I'm like, yeah, but I'm not white, and if I tick that box, then I'm ticking that box, and I'm not acknowledging all the people and the struggles that all these people before me have had, and that's the lineage where I've come from. But I also don't want to not tick that box because I don't have the struggles of someone that's mixed race or black, because then there's this, and then it's on the outside it's a simple action of ticking a box, and it's like, what does that matter if that's how the world sees you? But it's all the connotations of what being white means, and it's all those connotations of what being mixed race means. So in none of those boxes that are available to me that I feel represents how I feel on the inside. And I think that's the thing with gender. Obviously it's different if you're born into a body that you don't feel like you belong in. That's something different, because that's different to what we're talking about from what I personally understand with non-binary, because you don't feel as if you fit into either. But I think if you could, from my understanding and just for us like conversational sake, I wonder, just as a big question, like the change in that feeling of not feeling that sense of not belonging if the label wasn't so generalized and so huge and came with all these other
Oh, like completely. And I think it's going back to how society kind of like imprints these beliefs. Like if you look at the history of a lot of our traditions, they have no, they've been changed, shifted. You know, pink used to be a color for a boy because red was the masculine, and pink was for a boy, and I think it was blue for a girl. But I believe, now I don't know if this is actually correct, I remember I did a training on this, and a student told me this. Pink was actually then associated with homosexuals due to during the Second World War, and it was to do with the Nazi labeling of homosexual people. So there has been a shift in using pink. So I don't know if the origins of that is correct, but like when we start looking at that and like and looking at, you know, a typical you know, male man's reaction to, oh, use the pink one. Oh, I'm not using that, it's girly. Well, what do you think about girly?
So that's it, isn't it?
What's girly meaning to you?
And that's what it comes down to. It's these neural pathways that are formed in our brains. There's literally like how our brain's made up. So it's not something that's not physical. It is very physical, because in this world, if nothing's physical, we don't believe it. But like, it is physical neural pathways that are made in our brain to create these things of like our reactions. So when all these pathways have been built up and built up and built up, we react in certain ways, and then that's what brings so much emotion and such an overwhelming, which if you fit in that box, it feels great, right? It feels great. You're like, oh, this identity, and I feel so heard, and this is me, and I can embrace it and I can flaunt it. And if you do feel like a girly girl or a really masculine man, then it's great, because you're like, you feel heard and you feel like you belong and you can embrace that, and no one's judging you because you're like, oh, that's just what that is. And then other people feel comfortable because they're not confronted with their ideas that their neural pathways have like built up in their head, and then no one's feeling that sense of uncomfort that we were talking about like way back in the beginning, right? So I wonder if it is possible to like strip all that away, but then we can't ever strip it away completely, because we need that sense of identity. Because it's like, as you're saying, if there wasn't that label or that word as non-binary, or these conversations around pronouns, then how do you express how you're feeling in a way that is understood if there's not that box or that label to it? And when we're talking about, even earlier, we were talking about minorities, and we both were like, oh, we don't like to use that term, but then we know what we're talking about quickly and easily to move the conversation along, instead of making a list of all the people that we're talking about. And goodness, we don't want to forget one, you know what I mean? Like, so I wonder what is the perfect point, you know? It's just ever changing, isn't it?
It really is. And I think as well, there's that one part of the conversation missing. Like you hit the nail on the head before, like if we're bringing into that question, like, what's making you uncomfortable? Let's explore that before we move on. You know, there's another question that could be really, really useful, which is, well, yes, doesn't it make sense that we'd get things wrong on the path to getting it right? Yeah. Because I see a lot of the arguments that come back, well, if you're doing that for, you know, non-binary, transgender, or women, or whatever, then this, and blah, 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 and that doesn't make sense, and you've got positive discrimination, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's billions of us on the planet. We've got really messed up systems. There are many of us who, again, have the same commonality, like that idea of like freedom, safety, connection. We all want it. We want that. That's what we want. We want our autonomy, to be heard, to be seen, to be in community. And there are many different ways of going about it. And you know, it's anchoring ourselves into that ventral state, that relaxed, calm state where we're not triggered, to be able to have those solutions, but also accepting that we're going to get it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, we look at history, we've always got things wrong. We've got things very wrong. We've got things heinously wrong. It's the heinous things are happening still now. But there's also about like that progress, and it's like, how can we do that to support those people? Because at the end of the day, yes, we're looking at equality, but when we're looking at the equity, there is an equity. So, you know, you can have, you know, white middle class people, which I am one of, you know, getting pissed off with certain changes. I don't get pissed off with a lot of changes, but I have a certain type of person in mind as I'm talking right now. But the reality is, when we're looking at that equity, we need change. The one bit that I don't know the answer to is what that looks like, but this is why we need to come together in that connection, you know, like, and talk it all through and see what that change looks like. But yeah.
And with different groups of people as well. I think with what you said is so lovely, and it's that way that, like, if we're all sitting in a group of people all like us, and it's like, great idea, you know what, yeah, you got it, and then the guy goes, yeah, you know, we got this. And I think that's the people that are in charge and have been in charge for so long. They're all looking at reflections of themselves, so there's no one going, actually, wait a minute, like, have you thought of, it's like you, like when I'm saying about, like, you know, coming to that place in our heart, and you're like, wait, well, actually, and then, like, I'm then thinking, yeah, of course, that makes sense. Like, I didn't put that into words because that wasn't what come to the front of my head initially when I was speaking. We need these people. If these people, or like a mixture of people just generally, aren't in that room and these conversations are being had, there's no one to go, and then on the flip side of that, we need the people who are being like, yeah, who are feeling all comfortable, to be comfortable with this uncomfortable situation that's being raised, to be like, to stop and listen and be comfortable in themselves as well, because if you're not comfortable in yourselves, then you can't listen. But oh, Saša, we could go on for ages.
I know. I don't even know what time it is right now. Like, what time we're on? Oh my God, we've nearly done an hour.
I know. Oh, well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. Is there anything else that you would like to add in before we do?
No, because it'll probably take us on another tangent, which we'll do another hour of. But I will say one thing, you know, you said, like, if it's not physical, like, we don't believe it. Not to blow your bubble, but 99.9% of everything is actually nothing on an atomic level. So nothing really exists. Nothing really ever touches. It's just electrostatic repulsion. So, like, it's so funny that we're desperate for, like, these tangible, like, answers where we can just embrace and go, like, we know shit. We know.
I know. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's like the society, though, isn't it? Like, the society in which we live in, it needs to be things that we feel and touch and see. But the conversation, like, isn't what you're saying. What was that you said? What was the percentage?
Above 99.9%.
It's space.
Yeah, it's just there's space. And yeah, there's like virtual soups of particles going in and out of existence all the time.
And there's nothing that we can, like, we probably only understand about 1% of that. You know what I mean? Because something that I see that is, our brain isn't even the thing that's touching and feeling. This is how far away our senses are from the world. Our brain is locked inside our skull, which is locked inside this membrane, inside this vessel of all sorts, and with all these other simulations coming in, there's so much room for that to go so wrong and manipulated with all these layers of experience that we've all had. Man, yeah,
couldn't agree more.
It's crazy. 99% of space. Oh, well, Saša, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for chatting with me. It's been amazing. So much love to you, and yeah, I look forward to seeing where the rest of your journey goes.
Yeah, and you keep in touch. I'll talk to you soon.
Lots of love.
Bye.